Welcome to another episode of Critic.Reading.Writing. My name is Quayson and I am Professor of English and Chair of the Department of African and African American Studies at Stanford University. Children's movies are remarkable conduits for shaping the imagination of our children. That, of course, goes without saying. They are popular, they are funny, they are visually stunning, and they also carry subtle and not so subtle social and cultural cues. Most influential in the past several decades have been the movies brought out by Disney and Pixar. My now adult children and I have a dedicated WhatsApp group we have had for about a decade now, in which we regularly review and discuss every movie that Disney and Pixar have produced. Some of them are subjected to intense scrutiny. From time to time, we also draw up shifting best movie lists for both Disney and Pixar that we debate endlessly. This episode is dedicated to my children and our WhatsApp group. There are several important distinctions to be drawn between Disney and Pixar, their collaborations since Toy Story in 1995 notwithstanding. A small set of distinctions will have to suffice for now. As a general rule, Disney's children's films are essentially sing-along musicals in which the characters regularly break out into singing as a way of punctuating the action. The list of such songs is long, but the ones that readily come to my own mind are Look for the Bare Necessities, from Disney's originally animated The Jungle Book of 1967. Everybody Wants to Be a Cat from The Aristocats of 1970. And Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid of 1989. Pixar, on the other hand, does not have the characters break out into collective singing, but rather specializes in memorable soundtracks of their own that help to also punctuate the animated movies. Randy Newman has been responsible for some of the most wonderful and memorable tunes, such as You've Got a Friend in Me from Toy Story 1995 and The Time of Your Life from A Bug's Life in 1998. Camille and Michael Giacchino's French language Le Festin from Ratatouille is simply a masterpiece in my humble opinion. But many of the songs in these children's movies are absolutely terrific. Perhaps the most important distinction between Disney and Pixar movies, however, is the shift from the friend-and-sidekick formula that dominates Disney to the frenemies formula that has been central to Pixar. There are many memorable friend and sidekick pairings in Disney across the range of their movies. The sidekicks take on various roles, such as providing a form of conscience or sense of freedom to the main character, such as we find with Baloo and Mowgli in The Jungle Book, or with Mushu and Mulan in Mulan, or as a comic counterpoint, such as we find with Napoleon and Lafayette in The Aristocats. Pixar borrows this formula to very good effect in the Monsters, Inc. series with Mike Wazowski, Mike, and James B. Sullivan, Sully. But as a general rule, their movies are built around the evolving relationship between competing frenemies. The prototype of this pairing is with Woody and Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. By the end of the first Toy Story, the often fraught competitiveness between Woody and Buzz is resolved, but the frenemies formula is replicated in Toy Story 2, with Jessie the cowgirl now providing the counterpoint to both Woody and Buzz, who are now practically of the same mind on almost everything. From Toy Story 3, the frenemies formula is somewhat attenuated, and in that particular movie we have a straightforward villain in the character of Lot-O-Hugging Bear. Some in my family have argued vehemently that the Toy Story franchise falls off in interest after Toy Story 3, and I think this may be the reason why. Also shared by both Disney and Pixar, but applied in different ways, is the quest motif, in which the central character seeks to find their purpose in life in the face of various impediments, temptations, or simply the fear of being rejected if they reveal their true selves, as with the character of Aladdin in Disney's Aladdin from 1992, or Pixar's teenage Riley in Inside Out 2 from 2024. Echoes of Riley's anxieties about fitting in among her friends are to be found much earlier in The Incredibles from 2004 with the character of Violet Parr. Children's film genres also provide a useful way for understanding the subtle variations in the use of disabled characters to raise wrinkles in the representational domain. And this is so also with Disney and Pixar. In Pixar's 2003 Finding Nemo, we see a quite remarkable and contradictory use of disability as an aspect of the frenemies format. While Dory and Marlin are not frenemies in the mold of Woody and Buzz, they too argue about almost everything in their quest to find Nemo. However, Dory, who suffers from short-term amnesia, is clearly a superior guide to the paranoid and petulant Marlin, father of the lost Nemo, for whom they are out searching the ocean. It is Dory who gets Marlin through many close dangers of various kinds, as much by her superior wit as by her sheer ability not to give in to a sense of danger. Hers is a moment-by-moment existence that does not bother either with the immediate past or the imminent future. Her mantra is just keep swimming, which she says to herself to strengthen her resolve to keep moving forward no matter the impediments or problems. And yet, something peculiar happens at a critical turning point in the movie. Marlin and Dory have just made it through a forest of stinging jellyfish and onto the East Australian Current, the EAC, which should take them to Sydney, where it is believed Nemo was taken by the divers who captured him earlier in the film. Both Marlin and Dory wake up from their misadventure in the jellyfish forest to find themselves on the back of turtles that are part of a large shoal on the EAC. Marlin wakes up on the back of Crush, an amiable turtle who gives him a valuable piece of advice when Marlin panics in seeing Crush's son Squirt momentarily swim outside the EAC and away from the shoal of turtles. Well, you never really know, but when they know, you know. On waking up, Marlin sees Dory seemingly asleep down below and believes she must be badly hurt, but as always, he's completely mistaken. She's already awake and excitedly playing hide and seek with the little turtles on the journey. They see him and pounce on him, pleading with him to tell them the story of his adventures up to that point. Marlin is reluctant at first, but then proceeds with his story, which we are familiar with, having already seen it unfolding up to that point. The story he tells is picked up by the little turtles and in a series of relays is passed on as a form of oral myth-making or storytelling from one of the child turtles to some sea bass, then to swordfish, then to crabs and dolphins who talk whilst diving in and out of the surface of the ocean, and on to birds who in their turn pass the story on to the seagulls way out in Sydney Harbour. At the end of the relay, one of the seagulls at the lighthouse on Sydney Harbour declares, "That is one dedicated father, if you ask me," thus registering admiration for what appears to be Marlin's utter determination to find his son against all odds. Marlin's story has thus become the currency of legend. He is a myth in his own time. The production of what is clearly meant to be the memory of the film in the form of an oral heroic narrative, however, shows one apparently innocent but quite significant deficit. At no point, either in his account or in the long and complicated process of its dissemination and redaction across the seas, is mention made of Dory's role in the adventures, ever. In other words, the myth-making is a memory that itself suffers from some form of amnesia. But because the amnesia affects the remembered status of Dory, the only disabled character in the film that suffers from that condition, it is almost as if to suggest that the process of myth-making mimes her own forgetfulness on her behalf. Thus, even though her disability makes her central to the process by which the main protagonist is aided in his quest, it is precisely her amnesia that is discursively enacted in Marlin's story, and that allows her to be erased from the making of the oral tradition of what is a wide and open ocean space. This is not a simple matter, since in the retelling of Marlin's account, a diverse range of sea creatures has been brought into account, thus registering the fact that his story will spread in various circles all across the wide oceans. It is important to remember that Australia is itself in the Pacific, the Indian, and the Southern Oceans, so that the story must be taken to be spreading a very long distance. We see in this particular use of disability a bifurcation of effects. On the one hand, Dory is clearly the instrument for clarifying motivational impulses for Marlin, and indeed for helping him to overcome the effects of the extreme paranoia of the sea he developed on the tragic death of his wife at the start of the film. And yet, on the other hand, in the wider narrative discourse at which the medium establishes either proximity or distance from the perspective of different characters, there is a subtle design to memorialize the male non-disabled character's actions and to marginalize that of the female character with a disability. Dory is by this means made to be both central and peripheral, an insider and an outsider to the subtler meanings of the film. Surface reading will of course affirm her extremely important role, yet a close examination reveals that all does not cohere properly around our surface interpretation. It has to be noted, however, that even though Dory's extreme form of short-term amnesia makes her stand out in the film, she is not the only one to carry a disability. Nemo himself has one fin smaller than the other, and the character of Gil, a member of the fish tank in the dentist's practice in Sydney, has a garbled fin. He is a peculiar figure whose characterization combines an interplay between darkness and light that makes him come across essentially as a depressed cynic. He turns to the benign influence only after almost getting Nemo killed in one of his many fruitless plots to get himself and the other fish out of the small aquarium they have been trapped in the dentist's practice, and back into the sea. Most of Pixar's films are not narrated exclusively for children, and they have succeeded in creating an intergenerational appeal for the films. That is definitely the case with Finding Nemo. As the director Andrew Stanton put it in To Infinity and Beyond, the story of Pixar Animation Studios in 2007, then I started to think about, wow, I don't think I've ever seen an animation film that takes a parent-child relationship and tells it from the parent's point of view. Can you do that in a way that will allow kids to relate to it? That kind of made the whole story start slowly come together. From a brain sting standpoint, it took years to develop. But then, once I had all the pieces, it was about maybe a year and a half of writing till we got into production. There are several points then to be taken from the account we've provided thus far. The first, and perhaps most obvious, is the immense attention to detail that goes into such children's films. Some of them are clearly masterpieces of storytelling that stay with us and are passed on from generation to generation. Second, and equally important, is that these movies also carry subtle and not so subtle cultural and social messages. We have focused in this episode specifically on the question of disability, but other things can be said of sometimes problematic social and gender biases inherent to the genre. The point is not to shield our children's eyes from all the wonders available on screen, but to help them progressively develop a more sophisticated attitude to what they are seeing, even while we all squeal along with them in absolute delight. Both the films and our children are a wonder to behold. Thank you. Please remember to check out the suggested readings in the episode's description. And if you like this episode, give a thumbs up, subscribe and share, hit the notifications bell so that you do not miss out on any upcoming episodes. And enter your comments in the section below. See you next week.